Bellic reverses. Trying to get a good spot on the swing set. Oh, and out he goes. Let's see how far this will take him. Over the building. Oh, and he has done it. If you watched my video on the various differences that there were between the first trailer of GTA 4 and what we ended up getting in the final game, you'll know I mentioned at one point that ferries were cut from the game. No, not the little mythical creatures with wings, the big boats that carry cars and people across a body of water. When the first trailer shows us the terminal in Alderney, we can clearly see that a ferry is docked at one of the slips. This is something that never appears in the final game, and I had a lot to say about it, but I didn't want to take up too much time in the last video, because I think this topic deserves its own video. First, let's take a look at the ferry itself as we see in the trailer. It looks like it probably says Liberty Ferry on it, and even though we can't get a view of the whole thing, my guess is that it's based on one of the New York waterway ferries. This is probably more or less what it would have looked like. The New York waterway ferries are commonly used in the New York City area, including in the real-life equivalent of the ferry terminal in Alderney, the Hoboken terminal. Speaking of the terminal, let's have a closer look at it. I remember how I used to think that this place was supposed to be abandoned, and then I found it strange how pedestrians still spawn inside of it. Now, both in the first trailer and in the finished game, the terminal does look pretty dilapidated, but there's also a lot of construction equipment around too. In real life in the 2000s, the Hoboken terminal had seen better days, but in 2008 it was already under renovation. So while I thought at first that maybe the decision to make the terminal abandoned or under renovation was just a way of explaining around the fact that they had to cut ferries, it's actually something that was true to the real-life location. Even if the ferries had been present in the game and operational, it still would have had this look to it. And like I mentioned before, pedestrians still spawn inside of the terminal. Some are gathered around each other having conversations, some are standing near the edge of the dock as if they're supposed to be waiting for a boat to arrive. There's even Alderney State Police who spawn with rifles as transportation guards, very much like how the LCPD will spawn at subway stations and at the airport. You can easily tell from the NPCs alone, this place was meant to be featured a bit more prominently than it was. If it was an abandoned ferry terminal, there wouldn't be this much activity inside of it. So, when you have a ferry terminal in a city with multiple waterways separating its boroughs, there's gotta be someplace else for it to go. It's not like it's the airport, where it's fine that there's only one on the map because there aren't even any flyable planes in the game. A ferry that would be docked in Alderney right across from Algonquin would obviously be meant to be taken to Liberty City, right? That makes sense. Well, you'd think, but then you have to wonder, where is the other ferry terminal located at? Obviously, it would be somewhere in Liberty City, since I don't think that the ferries would just go from one part of Alderney to another. And the other docks in Alderney are all industrial and shipping ports. They're not ferry docks for civilians. The next logical place that the ferries would likely dock at and take the player to would be Algonquin. I don't think any of the other boroughs would really have ferries to access them, but I say Algonquin because it's basically the heart of Liberty City, and there's a huge amount of ferry traffic between New York and New Jersey in real life that originates in Manhattan. Let's take a short tour around Algonquin and try to find out where these ferries would go. It's definitely not directly down the river, since these are all clearly little docks meant for private boats. It wouldn't be at the docks in Castle Garden City, since once again, those are more for small boats, not ferries. I'll be honest, when I first started searching Algonquin for the place that a ferry terminal might have been located at, I started to wonder if Yusuf's construction site might have originally been it. Now you hear that and you might be thinking, what? Why? That's crazy. Well, the reason I said that is because I thought that these little portions in the structure kinda looked like dry docks or something, but that's not the only reason. It bears a resemblance to the real-life ferry port in Lower Manhattan. It's almost in the same location as the construction site in the game. So, if this place wasn't the Algonquin ferry terminal, even though it resembles one, where exactly was the terminal? Well, when I took the helicopter out for another look at the edges of the island, I noticed this place that I know I've seen before previously, but never really paid that much attention to. It has the normal-looking smaller docks that you'd find at most of these places in Algonquin, but then it's got these wide openings that just lead directly into the water for no reason. They're definitely wide enough to fit a car. There's a ton of pedestrian activity around here, just like at the ferry terminal in Alderney. People even spawn on the docks, like if they're waiting for something. And then there's the cops standing guard, just like at every other transit hub in the city. I am almost positive that this was supposed to be the ferry terminal in Algonquin. Now here's something interesting about this place too, and this is something I never actually noticed until I was making this video. It has an interior. It looks kinda bare inside, but for a non-enterable building, and one that's not even important to the story that would require this much detail, it having an interior is still pretty strange to see. The buildings that have properly made interiors don't even have transparent windows like this. Because of this, I decided to ask some people on my Discord server what they thought of this. A member known as Recursion has the PC version, and after the patch on June 3rd, he was able to get GTA 4 to finally work again. And because he has a trainer installed, he could air brake into the building and take a look inside. And honestly, it was not what I was expecting to find. For starters, when you go in, the place has collision. Nico doesn't fall through the ground into an empty void. The floor is textured and solid. He can walk on it. But notice how there's a ceiling as well? That's because this is only the first floor of that building. Yeah, that's right, there's more than one. He was able to air brake up and reach the second level, and this is where you have that big part of the building with the glass windows surrounding you. Like with the lower level, the floor is solid. And not only that, there's 2 extra rooms in here, which also have solid floors. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, and I'm thinking it too. Oh my god, what is this place? Inaccessible buildings in the game don't just have solid floors that you can walk on. Recursion got a screenshot of this to show as an example. When this building was modeled, it was clearly done so with a floor. Other buildings just have nothing underneath them because we were never meant to even see inside of them. But something tells me that this building was going to have some purpose in the game. My guess is that it would have been a big terminal for the ferries. There probably would have been additional details like benches, newspaper stands, maybe a place to purchase a ticket for a ferry ride. But then the ferries were scrapped, probably when they were in the middle of building this place. So when it was no longer needed as an interior, it was simply left as is in its unfinished state. By the way, if you shoot at the ground or the beams in this place, it all has collision effects. Nothing in here can be walked through. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this place was meant to be the Algonquin ferry terminal connecting to the one in Alderney. And here's another thing, besides taking a ferry to Alderney, what if we could have also taken it to Happiness Island? They have docks and police standing guard just like at the ferry terminals in the city. And getting to ride a ferry over to see the statue would basically be like how you do it in real life. I don't think people just take helicopters and land them in the middle of Liberty Island or on the statue itself, or parachute out to see the statue. To me, boats to and from the Statue of Happiness were always something that felt like they were kind of missing from the city. Something that it could have used just to make it feel a little bit more New Yorkish, but maybe the Liberty ferries would have taken us there. Given how these terminals have different slips, maybe one would have been for people who want to go between Algonquin and Alderney, and then another could have been for people who want to go to Happiness Island. That's my theory, at least. By the way, here's something interesting you can see online at the Cutting Room Floor's GTA 4 page. There's an unused map icon in the files of the game known as Radar Boat Tour. This most likely would have been for the ferry terminals. Maybe they would have had tours of the city's waterways in the way that Higgins Teletours can give players a tour of the city with a helicopter. You know what else I'm wondering now too? Would the ferries have been vehicles that we could have taken control of, or would they be like the airplanes in the game that might as well just be moving buildings? You can't commandeer them, you can't throw them off course, you certainly can't destroy them, they're just there. Would the tugboats have been like this, or would they have been actual vehicles? Because if they were vehicles that we could actually take control of, I wonder if maybe we're replaced with the tugboat. The reason I say this is because both are huge boats, the tugboat probably being the biggest vehicle that we can commandeer, and for fun, I decided to see what it was like to take a tugboat for a spin from Algonquin to Alderney. Even if the tugboat didn't replace the ferry, it's probably the same size as the ferry, and I'm sure modders could easily turn this big old thing into a ferry, but I digress. Back to pretending that this tugboat's a ferry. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I had to speed this up. This thing is as slow as the loading times for GTA Online. Alright, here we are. It kind of fits in the Algonquin slip. Each one would have been docked here. You probably would have seen pedestrians getting on and off. This is also probably where the player would have been able to get on, or drive onto it if you take your car. Now let's take her to Alderney. I gotta say, the ferry ride would probably be really slow. Probably about as slow as this, but it wouldn't be that bad. You'd get some nice views of Algonquin if they let you walk around on it, but if they wouldn't, then you'd probably just be able to see the cinematic camera, like when riding the subway trains. Not too bad. I'm sure most players would probably skip the journey anyway. Okay, here we go. We are now arriving at the Port Tudor Ferry Terminal in Alderney. And would you look at that? The tugboat is an almost perfect fit. Now we can act like we're gonna pick up passengers and... Okay, I don't know what just happened, but this basically broke the game. It glitches out, it slowed everything down, and then it respawns you in the air. This is weird. It's about as weird as that time I accidentally got launched underground by the swing set glitch. I tried this again, and while it didn't totally break the game, the performance tanked. By the way, you hear that? that is my controller. It won't stop vibrating. I wonder if the tugboat being such a big vehicle in an enclosed space like this ferry port is what was causing the issue. Maybe the game can't handle it for some reason. This got me thinking, what if this could be part of the reason why the ferries were cut? If the ferries were considered vehicles by the game and not just structures, could they have been causing some major performance issues as soon as they tried docking at Alderney? Because doing this again, it seems like crashing it into the docks would come close to crashing the game entirely. I don't have any clue why this would happen, but it's a possibility. Or maybe not. Maybe the ferries were cut for some other reason. Like maybe the AI couldn't handle operating such a massive vehicle. Or there could have been any number of other issues. Like with a lot of things that changed during development, we can only guess what the reason was for removing ferries. But hey, I'll be lying if I said I didn't have fun looking into this. And wow, isn't that a great shot from inside of that likely unused ferry terminal? It's a great view from there. Big thanks to Recursion for that shot, as well as some other screenshots and footage from inside the place. It was a big help.